Great. Thank you, Colton. And thanks everybody for attending. This is our third in a series of 5 webinars designed to introduce new folks to different types of hunting as our fall hunting seasons start to open up. Last week, dove season opened. This weekend, teal season opens. And next week is archery season for deer and turkey. So we've got Justin McGuire with the Missouri Department of Conservation here to share some tips and basics for us, and hopefully if you're ready to dive into archery hunting, give you the knowledge that you need to have a successful start. So Justin, real quick, why don't you introduce your title with MDC and then jump into your presentation. And thanks for being here.
Sure, thanks, Zach. I appreciate being invited. Like Zach said, I am Justin McGuire. I'm the Hunter Education and Shooting Range Coordinator for the Missouri Department of Conservation. So my job is essentially to teach people how to hunt and shoot, and how to do those things safely. So beyond my career, I am a essentially lifelong hunter and lifelong bow hunter. I've been shooting archery almost as long as I've been shooting firearms, and have been pounding the woods for lots and lots of years, especially deer hunting with archery equipment. I really enjoy that. It is with that I will share with you guys some information that I put together. If you can't see this, someone give me a thumbs down or something, but you ought to be able to see my slideshow here. So I wanted to start out with, let's see, there we go. Here's our objectives for today. I'm going to go through a little bit of history. I'm not going to bore us too much on that. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on equipment because it's important, and your choices vary so much with equipment. We're going to talk about where to hunt. We're going to talk about how to hunt. And we're going to talk about a little bit about how to do it safely. So we're going to jump right into history here. So since there have been humans have sought for better and more efficient ways to kill animals in order to eat them. Started out with rocks and sticks. At some point, those folks decided that blunt objects weren't the best thing to go with, so they started sharpening those rocks and sticks, and somewhere along the way, they figured out they wanted to put a little bit of distance between them and whatever they were trying to hunt. It went to spears, and then at some point along the way we went to atlatls. And if you haven't done any research, if you've never heard of the term atlatl before, do some research into them. They were a method by which early man were able to throw spears with great velocity and very little physical effort. And then we got into archery equipment well before firearms, well before gunpowder. And that started with long bows, which most folks would tell you we can find history of long bows back to about 10,000 years ago. Crossbows are older than you might suspect. They started showing up somewhere around 2,500 years ago. And then our modern compound bow that people are probably most familiar with has really only been around about 60 years, 55 to 60 years. So I want to start this equipment talk with a disclaimer. I really do suggest that you find a local archery shop to help you in this journey. A lot of this stuff about archery equipment is very technical. It can be dangerous if it's not done correctly. And you'll hear me refer to this later. At some point in your journey, you will probably become comfortable enough to work on archery equipment yourself. I know I have at some point in my archery journey. I now do most of my work myself, but that takes experience and it takes time to learn those things. So when you're just getting started, it really is a must to find a local archery shop to help you get to know those folks that work in that archery shop, and just go in eager to learn, and they will be eager to teach you. So you heard me refer to longbows that showed up about 10,000 years ago. This is an example of a longbow. And I'm going to switch real quick to an example of a recurve. They're both what we now call traditional archery methods. You can see on this recurve that the tips of the limbs of the bow face away from the shooter. So the shooter is on the string side of that bow, and you can see on this recurve that the tips point away from the shooter. On the longbow, they turn and face back towards the shooter. Some things that you need to know about the longbow, they are traditionally a little bit easier to shoot than recurves. They're usually longer than a recurve, and they're known for being a little quieter than a recurve. The recurve bows can be a little shorter. You'll notice that on this bow, it's got limb bolts right here that attach this limb to the riser of the bow. We call that a takedown recurve. You take those limbs off, and that whole bow stores into a relatively short space. Again, a little bit shorter in most cases, going to be a little bit louder, but they are considered to be more accurate than longbow. And we're not going to go into that in much detail, but just know that between some of these traditional archery methods are pros and cons. There are things you might choose a recurve for over a longbow, but a lot of that's going to be personal preference. This is what you might be most familiar with nowadays if you watch hunting videos or anything like that. This is our modern compound bow. You will notice that it has a more or less a pulley system, cam and an idler wheel. Some of them have 2 cams. On the bottom wheel at the bottom is called a cam. The top wheel is considered an idler wheel. It allows the bow to transfer a lot of energy into the string to propel the arrow. They're going to shoot a lot faster. They can be heavy. Compound bows are usually much heavier than your traditional archery methods, but it is the most common of the vertical bows. And we have a horizontal bow, a crossbow. Crossbows are usually even faster than a compound bow. It maintains the draw, so you can pull that string back and lock it in the drawn position, so it maintains the draw of the archery equipment, and you discharge it by squeezing a trigger like a firearm. They are heavy, so they work really well for kids and beginners because you don't have to learn to draw the bow. You can sit in your tree stand or in your ground blind. You can hunt with it already drawn, and then you aim through an optic like what's on this crossbow right now. It's a scope, a low power scope, and just pull the trigger like a firearm. So once you decide what type of bow or archery equipment you want to use, you're going to need to decide what arrows you would like to use with that equipment. Your choice of method, so longbow, recurve, compound, crossbow, that will determine the arrows that you need. So a lot of your traditional archers will use a wooden arrow because it calls back to ancient history, and that's one reason why a lot of people will shoot those traditional methods. Is because they want to be, closer to their ancestors. There are still some folks that shoot aluminum arrows, and there are carbon arrows. Carbon arrows are will not stay permanently bent. They're flexible, but they can crack and they can splinter. Aluminum arrows will bend and stay bent, so keeping straight arrows is important with aluminum arrows. And then wood arrows obviously are usually going to be heavier and harder to find straight arrows than carbon arrows. So just know that your choice of method will usually determine what arrows you need. And that, again, that stuff is stuff that your shop, your local archery shop, your professionals are going to know how to direct you in what types of arrows that you need or help you with what you want. Once you pick an arrow, you're going to need a broadhead. That's the sharp end of the stick, like what we were talking about earlier. There are a couple different kinds, and there are hundreds of variations of these different types of broadheads. This one picture here is fixed blade. It's kind of self-explanatory. It has a sharp cut-on contact point. Nothing moves on that broadhead. It is just a solid piece of steel with a couple razor edges on it, and there is not much else to that broadhead. Compare that with a mechanical broadhead. This one actually, when it hits something, so I gave you an example here of a broadhead before deployment and a mechanical broadhead after deployment. One of the advantages of mechanical broadhead, much to your practice points. A practice point's just going to be a smooth, just a smooth pointed piece of steel that screws into the end of your arrow. These will fly. These fixed blades kind of looks like a wing. So they are prone, if your equipment's not tuned correctly, they are prone to catching the wind, which might affect your arrow flight. And then you can get in lots and lots of other accessories. And I just will whip through. You've got quivers, you've got sights, you've got string, peep sights, you've got string dampeners, you've got stabilizers, you've got wrist slings. And I just went through that real quick, and we're not going to spend any time on it. And you just need to know that you can spend as much or as little money as into this hobby. And a lot of the money that you spend in this hobby will be spent on accessories. So you can choose to go with low cost accessories, go with super high cost accessories. No, the accessories do not make the shooter. So put into practice. Put your money and your time into practice and muscle memory, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Again, find a local archery shop, set up your equipment. And what I was talking about, you might eventually get to the point where you can work on it yourself, but it's a time and experience. So you have the equipment that you want to use, you visited your local archery shop, you are to see what you can do with this equipment. Now go shoot. And when you're done with that, shoot a lot. And when you're done with that, more. Archery will use muscles that aren't developed in everyday life. It takes time to develop those muscles and create good shooting habits. You will want to shoot a lot. Used to, back when I was growing up, my dad wouldn't let me archery hunt until I could fit 6 arrows in a 9-inch pie plate. Anymore, that type of accuracy is not even accepted. People are shooting for much better groups than 6 arrows in a 9-inch pie plate at 40 yards. And with today's equipment, it is much easier to achieve that type of accuracy. But the moral of this is go shoot a lot, and shoot right. You know, I said, I mentioned here, create good shooting habits. At the end of this presentation, I'll have a slide with some resources for you to go check out, to talk about or to look and research into archery equipment. Rely heavily on those resources and learn good habits. Rely on the folks at your archery shop. They will help you. So shoot a lot, shoot right, and create those good shooting habits and develop those muscles. So now we've gotten our equipment, we are adequate shooters, and so we want to decide where to hunt. Your first question about where to hunt is probably public or private. Do you know someone that has a farm that's going to allow you to hunt? Do you not know anybody and you're going to be out there with the rest of us slogging it out on private ground and putting in a little bit, or I'm sorry, on public ground, putting in a little extra work and seeing what you can do on public? If your answer to that question was private, make sure you get all the necessary permissions from landowners. Don't just assume that you have permission to walk into a property and to hunt that property. Make sure you get all the necessary permissions and treat those properties and those relationships well. You know, one of the things we talk about in hunter education is, you know, leave gates the way you found them. If you're walking into a farm and you walk through an open gate, leave that gate open. But if you have to open a gate, if you have to open a closed gate to walk through it, close it behind you. Make sure that you're not leaving litter. Make sure that you're not rutting up someone's field with your vehicle. And keep those relationships in good working order. Send a Christmas card, send a thank you note, send a thank you gift. Make sure that that landowner knows that you appreciate them being willing to allow you to hunt on their property. And that's also going to reflect really well for the rest of us hunters that are out there doing it too. If your answer to the original question was public ground, there are lots of options in the state of Missouri. We are very fortunate that we have about 3 million acres of public property in the state of Missouri. And those consist of Missouri Department of Conservation areas. We've got about 1 million acres. The U.S. Forest Service takes up most of the rest of the public acres in this state. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and you've also got some county property and some city property and some other types of public ground that you could have permission to hunt on. But just make sure that you know what the regulations are on those specific properties that you are hunting. Google is your friend here. Make sure you do the research and find out the restrictions on or the allowances on those public properties. Whichever you decide to hunt, always be mindful of others, especially on public ground. Be mindful that we are sharing these acres with lots of other people who are not necessarily hunters. They could be mushroom hunters or hikers or bikers or bird watchers. So always be mindful of others and know that other people are out there enjoying their property the same way you are. So you've decided that we're going to go hunt some property. You know which property you're going to go hunt. And now you need to scout. You need to find where on that property is your best place to spend your time in the woods hunting your game species. Admittedly, some of the rest of this will be pretty heavy on deer hunting. Archery hunting opens up next Wednesday, a week from today. And the big driver behind our archery season is the white-tailed deer. So a lot of what you're going to see from here on out in this presentation is going to be deer related. So e-scouting, you can sit on your couch and get a pretty good idea of the type of habitat that's available on your property that you're going to be hunting. Use a map software or an app. There are lots and lots of them out there. And learn how to use it well. You can place waypoints on these softwares. You can zoom in and zoom out and look for different types of things that you're trying to identify. So you can do a lot of scouting from your couch. And one of the things that you're going to look for, deer and turkey are creatures of edge habitat. So you want to look for habitat diversity. When you have different types of habitat in close proximity to each other, that is going to be a place that you're going to want to try to put some boots on the ground. And right here, once you find that habitat, put the boots on the ground. There is no substitute for in-person scouting. So you're sitting at home, you're doing your e-scouting, you find a spot that you think, this looks like something that might be a good place. We've got lots of different habitat areas, or lots of different habitats within close proximity to each other. Go visit the property and put some boots on the ground. So now you're at the property, what are you going to be looking for? Like I said, we're getting into some pretty deer heavy stuff now. So you're going to be looking for tracks. You're going to be looking for scat or their droppings. For deer, it can look clumpy like the one on the left, or it can look like little oblong pellets on the right. You might find rubs. Rubs are something that male deer or bucks do to mark territory. They have scent glands on their foreheads, and they will mark up a tree with their antlers and rub their scent glands all over that tree. So it's a way that deer communicate with each other, and it's a way that bucks will set their territories. And another way that they do that is with scrapes. So you can see this deer here on the right, this buck, he's using his paw to clear out this spot on the ground. He will then urinate in that spot. Most of the time, as you can see in this picture on the left, there's usually a little branch that's probably hanging over the top of a scrape, because again, bucks will reach up with their mouth and their forehead, and they'll put their scent on those, what we call licking branches. So this is another way that deer communicate. They will urinate inside these scrapes and communicate with each other. You might find areas that have some browse, places where you can visibly see that deer have been feeding. This picture on the left is a picture of soybeans, and you can tell from those stems in the middle that deer have just nipped off the ends of those stems. It's a pretty telltale sign that deer are using that field pretty regularly. On the right is what we call a browse line. In areas that have dense deer populations, almost every field edge will look like that, and that browse line will be right about the height that a deer can reach standing on all fours. They'll eat the leaves and the fresh growth and the twigs off the ends of the branches, and you wind up with a browse line like that. So you're looking for places where deer feed, and primarily, especially in southern Missouri, acorns are the ticket. Up in north, there are some areas south of the river and many areas north of the river. You're also going to be looking at crops, like we saw in that browse photo with the soybeans, corn. You're looking for what they're eating. And even in areas with crops, it's hard for deer to turn down acorns. They love them, and if you find a heavy concentration of oak trees that are dropping acorns, you are more than likely going to find that other sign that we talked about with the tracks and the scat, the rubs and the scrapes. So concentrate on what they're eating, and that's going to require you to put some boots on the ground and just go look and find out where the deer are congregating. Some other things to keep in mind is that deer have great noses, great eyesight, and great hearing. And for that reason, they are incredibly hard to hunt. So when you find that spot that has all that sign that you're looking for, and you know that deer are spending time in those areas, you're going to want to hunt downwind of that chosen location and sit still. And something that I did not put in here that I probably should have is you want to sit downwind within a reasonable archery shot distance of where you suspect those animals will be. So if that's a trail, or if that's a scrape that deer are coming back and visiting routinely, you might want to set yourself up, or you do want to set yourself up probably within 20 to 30 yards of that location on the downwind side to hopefully beat that deer's nose and sit still so you can beat their eyes and you can beat their ears. So we're going to take all this and put it together into a case study. This is where I get to brag a little bit because this one is firsthand knowledge. This is a piece of an aerial photograph from a piece of public ground in central Missouri that I was fortunate enough to draw a managed archery deer hunt permit last year. And you can see here, somebody chime in. Can you see my mouse? Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So what you're looking at here is a ridge top. And you're looking at big ravines on either side of this ridge top. Big ravine, ridge top, and you've got a little finger ridge right here. So what I found when I scouted this property is I found what I thought was a buck bed down here off the end of this little finger ridge. And then so I started looking for more sign to try to put the pieces of the puzzle together. So I walked up the side of that main ridge there and I found a whole bunch of oak trees that were dropping acorns. So then I made my way a little bit further to the west there into that little clearing, and I found scrapes. In fact, this is a picture of one of the scrapes that I found in that little clearing. It was pretty fresh, it had been worked pretty regularly, and you can't see it very well, but my tree stand is right there in that tree. So I knew based on the forecast that the wind direction for the following day was going to be a northeast wind. So this was a big blown out view or a zoomed out view of this little piece of property. Now we're pulling in a little bit tighter, so you can see where the buck bed was. You can see where the acorns were on top of the ridge. You can see the scrape that I marked there, and you can see the wind direction. What I thought this buck was likely to do was this. He was going to get out of his bed, he'd go feed in the cover of the timber, and then, you know, right before dark, and then sometime right around dark, right around the end of shooting time, he would probably come out and check that scrape. Like I said, they use those scrapes to communicate with each other. And so they check them pretty regularly, and they really like to, deer are really active the last half hour of daylight and the first half hour of daylight. So I thought he'd get up out of that bed and he'd go feed around those acorns, and then he'd come out and check that scrape. And so for that reason, I put my tree stand right there at that little red cross. And that put me within about 20 yards downwind of where I thought that deer would come out and check that scrape. What this deer actually did was this. He got up and made a beeline right up the side of the ridge, right into the little clearing that I had my tree stand set up at, and was walking straight to that scrape. So you can see here, I put together all these different pieces of the puzzle. I had a bed, I had feed, I had a scrape, I had a wind direction. I used all of those to put myself into a position where I thought I was pretty likely that a deer was going to walk by within shooting distance. And that's exactly what happened. So right before dark the next day, I put my stand up the day before and I hunted it the next day. And right before dark the next day, that buck came walking by and I shot him at 6 yards from the base of my tree. This was him when I found him. And here's a hero shot. I had to throw in a hero shot. Y'all know I did. So some additional thoughts. You heard me refer to a tree stand over and over again. You need to decide, how are you going to hunt? How are you going to hunt these specific areas? Are you going to hunt out of a tree? Are you going to hunt off the ground? If you're going to hunt out of a tree, wear a fall arrest system. There are lots and lots of options on the market now for safety harnesses to keep you in the tree. And I tell people, I don't care if you're 2 feet off the ground or if you are 25 feet off the ground. If your feet leave the ground, be strapped to the tree. Be safe. It breaks my heart when folks fall out of tree stands, because those are 100% preventable incidents. They don't have to happen. But tree stands can be hard to install, so practice with them. Find a tree in your backyard, go to a conservation area and just use a tree next to the parking lot. Practice installing a tree stand. They can be difficult. And know the regulations for the property you're hunting. So in some cases, on every case I can think of on public ground, you cannot use any tree stand components that screw into a tree. Everything has to strap on. You can't use things that damage the tree in any way. So know the regulations for the property that you're hunting. If you are hunting out of a ground blind, know that ground blinds are heavy. They are convenient. You can pop them up anywhere, but they need to be brushed in to match the surrounding cover. So you want to take the vegetation that's right there in that area and build it up around that blind to make it look more natural to the deer or the turkey that you're trying to kill. And they are awesome to hunt out of. They are great tools, but they are heavy and they require some work to get them to blend in with the property that you're hunting. Some additional thoughts. Learn to blood trail. That is a 4-word sentence that can take lots and lots and lots of practice to learn. We're getting real close to my resource slide. Copy down these resources when I get there and make sure you spend some time, do a Google search. There are lots of videos, there are lots of articles teaching people how to blood trail. Know how you're going to get an animal out. It specifically on public property, you may not be able to drive right to where that deer or that turkey fell, so you need to figure out how you're going to get it out. They make little carts that you can pull behind you that you can strap a deer to or strap a turkey to, but know how you're going to get that animal out. Are you going to process it yourself or take it to a processor? Either way, be prepared beforehand. Know the hours of your processor. Do you need to keep that deer cold overnight so you can take it in the morning? Do they have an after hours drop off at the deer processor? Are you going to process it yourself? Do you know how? Do you have the space that's necessary? Tables and coolers and freezer space, and just be prepared beforehand. Know what you're going to do with an animal once you've harvested it and you're going to bring it home. Finally, don't get discouraged. This can be a difficult hobby. I love it passionately, but it can be a difficult hobby, and it is a process. So enjoy the process. It is technical, and it will lead you down some really awesome experiences. So don't get discouraged. So here's my resource page. Hunters Connected was actually a project by the International Hunter Education Association. They have a YouTube channel that just has dozens and dozens of short little how-to videos that is extremely valuable. It is a great resource. The National Deer Alliance, who used to be the Quality Deer Management Association, they have a YouTube presence. They've got a website with lots of information. I didn't put them here, but the National Wild Turkey Federation, has a lot of resources available to you on just general outdoor things and turkey specific things. Quail Forever and Pheasants Forever. I saw Kim Cole on here. Shout out to Kim. They have a lot of resources available that may relate to upland game, but at the same time are very useful for deer, for turkey, for things that you're going to hunt with archery equipment. And finally, good old fashioned web searches. Google's your friend. Use it and wade through the nonsense and absorb the good stuff. And it can take you a long way and teach you a lot. And with that, I'm ready for questions. So
Great. Thank you, Justin.